Hello and welcome to Gareth Icke Tonight. The UK government's Data Use and Access Bill, which received royal assent in June, has come into law and will be implemented forthwith. Probably haven't even heard of it. That's because that's what happens when the government and their lapdog mainstream media want something to pass without public scrutiny. They simply don't talk about it until it's already well on the way to becoming law, or in some cases already has. Big Brother Watch in the UK were one of very few voices pointing out the obvious implications of such a bill coming into law. Nearly all the bills that the government gets over the line are there with the sole intention of giving them more control and giving you and I less control over our own lives, less freedoms and less money in our pockets. Now, but some bills are about laying the groundwork for something else. They're about taking away the checks and balances that would prevent the government from doing something they've already planned, but for further down the line. For instance, the World Health Organization changed the definition of a pandemic to remove the words "with enormous number of deaths and illness," meaning the powers that be could later push the COVID button without the need for the deaths and illness to create a pandemic. The definition of vaccine was also subtly changed to accommodate the introduction of mRNA technologies. The newly adopted Data Use and Access Bill works on the same principle. Big Brother Watch stated in October last year that our data protection laws are among the few legal protections we have against these threats, AI and the like. Yet this bill waters them down by simultaneously eroding privacy protections and restricting people's control over their own data. In other words, the protections that would allow you to keep certain things about yourself, your medical data for example, private, would be eroded. Big Brother Watch went on. Meanwhile, advancing with a digital ID framework with serious implications for privacy that lacks a legal right to opt out poses a serious threat to individual autonomy and consent. And there is the point of all of this. Are we really to believe that a bill becoming law that strips away our protections over our personal data just happens to be coming in at the same time the government is pushing for the implementation of draconian digital IDs? Sorry, I wasn't born yesterday, I'm afraid. See, there's no point in introducing something like digital ID if there are legal protections in place that would prevent you from accessing the data required to implement the digital ID effectively. So you change the law to allow you to, do what you want. So with all the pieces of the puzzle in place to charge forward, you just need the people to accept it, or if at all possible, just to make your life easier, beg for it. They're selling digital ID in the UK as a fix for the mass immigration that consecutive governments have not only allowed but have incentivized. You create the problem so you can offer the much coveted, here's one I made earlier, solution. My dad coined the phrase problem reaction solution many years ago, and we are very much in the reaction phase right now. The people of the not-so-United Kingdom, and indeed the West in general, are at breaking point. They've been pushed to the wall, demoralised, disenfranchised, incessantly targeted, emotionally, mentally, financially, socially, through previous lockdowns and all the isolation that came with that. They've been forced to watch the quite blatant and coldly calculated destruction of their homeland. Their cities, towns, villages becoming unrecognisable in front of their very eyes. We've watched people go to prison for words while others receive lenient sentences or even walk free for some of the most heinous of crimes. The hatred is burning inside the bellies of the native chessboard pawns, and it's being pushed and prodded towards the non-native chessboard pawns, while those that are manipulating both sides are smiling from ear to ear because the plan is working. And now all the psychopaths' inexpensive suits need is a catalyzing event in order to implement their long-held goal of ultimate control. As the anger grows, much of it righteous, and the groups within our communities become more and more fractured, we reach ever closer to the optimum point for that aforementioned catalyzing event to have its most national and indeed global impact. That tells me one very important thing. We're about to enter false flag season. Now, whether or not we take the bait is, as always, down to us, and us alone. Coming up later on in the show, I'm joined by investigative journalist and business consultants Matt Stubbs and Phil Buchanan to talk about the state of free speech in the UK and what that means for journalists. And retired state-registered nurse and former government advisor Debi Evans is on to share her fears about organ harvesting and how the passing of the assisted dying bill could be connected to that industry. But first, Melissa Ciummei is an independent financial investor and researcher from Northern Ireland with a degree in theology from Trinity College Dublin. She's gained attention for her critical views on the economic and societal implications of government policies. Melissa, great to see you. You've spoken out on something called the City of Sanctuary Initiative in Northern Ireland. What is that, and why do you find its rollout concerning?
Initially, it wasn't concerning. It started as a grassroots movement in 2005. That was the City of Sanctuary Network itself. The more concerning part of it is that it's now extending beyond City of Sanctuary into streams of sanctuary. So streams of sanctuary are councils, schools, gardens, shops, even maternity units, libraries are all being umbrellaed under this term. And the framework for it is learn, embed, share. So it's to embed an NGO doctrine and ideology into our public spaces that are supposed to be neutral. So that was my concern with it. The more you look into it, particularly with councils, with Newry Down District Council, there is a movement towards them joining it. It was stopped in Bangor. It's gone through in Belfast and Derry. So this means that councils have to adhere to this ideology from the NGOs. And if you look, the NGO of City of Sanctuary, but if you look behind that, it's Esme Fairbairn, Paul Hamlin, Lloyds Bank. So these are who are funding it. So our councillors will no longer be answerable just to us. They'll be answerable to this network. And that's, for me, the part that's really concerning, because they love the word embed. And embed to me doesn't sound like welcoming for refugees or asylum seekers. It sounds more like indoctrination. And that was evidenced with the School of Sanctuary sending the Valentine's cards to men that these children did not know. So that would be my predominant concern with it, that it's an NGO method of infiltrating councils, schools, public spaces. And I don't think that anybody is aware of that aspect of it. It's not just some virtue nod like it's being billed to be.
As I understand it as well, there was meant to be a public meeting on this, but that meeting was cancelled. Why was that?
So originally we were trying to get more information from our local councillors about what it meant, because we were looking into the site and we had our concerns, so we wanted those settled. We were met with complete silence from our councillors. They did not respond, except for the DUP. They didn't respond in any way. We asked the DUP why they voted against, and the reason that they voted against is that there wasn't enough information regarding it, and they had concerns of this concept of City of Sanctuary would be associated with the American Sanctuary City and bring in unvetted asylum seekers. So that was their concern. So we kept on writing. They didn't respond in any way. So we called a public meeting. There was no issue with the public meeting. They were invited. I was going to do my presentation had they not have shown up, but they were invited to speak, to address the public. All of them were formally invited under Locals First initiative. Rather than address the public, we have been completely stonewalled by them. They got in touch with the venue and told the venue that we were far right, anti-immigration, anti-LGBT. It was nothing got to do with any of it. And the venue then emailed us saying that there was essential maintenance. But we were already in contact with the venue and told them we would do the full presentation for them. We had absolutely nothing to hide. But they bowed down clearly to the pressure of councillors, and they directly told us that it was councillors, our local representatives, that had this meeting cancelled. That forced us to take it to the streets of Newry, which we just did on Saturday. Again, every councillor was invited. Again, the only ones that could speak up were the ones that voted against. There's complete silence on it. And that makes it even more concerning. Why are they not answering us? Why would they not settle any concerns that their constituents would have?
That's the biggest red flag for me. When you have these situations where you have these either laws brought in or bills, going through Parliament and whatever, and there's no coverage of them, and there's no public dialogue. Do you think what they're trying to do basically is avoid having the public involved? Because actually, if the public started to look into it and scrutinise it, they would either find things that they don't like, or actually, as happens a lot, is the councillors probably don't even know what's in it.
I think they don't know what's in it. They're not being told what's in it. I think that it's just this absolute idea that it's something virtuous. I know that it won't stand up for public scrutiny. That's why they won't come forward with it. But the public should be very concerned with this, even this very notion, because it's moving into our institutions and public spaces, and it's creating this idea. It's like this, it's to get ahead of it and point the finger at us, that we are, us and our culture are some sort of latent threat, and we need to be re-educated. So we need to start with our children and teach our children. I know that there is a video circulating at the minute teaching them all about refugees, to teach then in the universities this ideology. And it's the same people, the same funders were behind the trans children movement are also funding this. So they have their own hidden agenda. Should our councillors be signing on? And under this, our councillors themselves will have to adhere to training under the City of Sanctuary Network. So we're training our councillors under this NGO, and they're just absolutely moving along with it. So it could be that they don't know. I think on the council level, I think that they just rubber stamped that. We certainly seen that during the health bill, that it was coming in already written and they just rubber stamped it. But for the civil servants that are pushing this through, they certainly know what they're doing. And that's why they're refusing to answer any councillors. They do want to do it behind closed doors. That was evidenced in Bangor. The DUP had to fight for this to be done in the public. There's no time ever where council should be doing things behind closed doors. They represent us. We should be invited in at all times, be it through Zoom or minutes or whatever. But to do this behind closed doors, that is your big red flag indicator for sure for me. So something's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact is, Melissa, they don't represent us, do they? And I think just more and more people are starting to work that out now. And I think that's because it's just becoming more obvious. It almost feels like they're not even trying. In the old days, they would kind of appease a little bit, whereas now it just feels like our elected officials are just like, yeah, nah, sorry, mate, I don't represent you, and I'm bored of actually pretending that I do. I wanted to talk, obviously, about this protest last weekend, but I was just something you mentioned earlier that I sort of caught it. Sending a Valentine's card. What was that about?
This was a school of sanctuary. Like I said, they're trying to embed in all our institutions. So the children were encouraged to send Valentine's cards to refugees and asylum seekers, offering, their love and support. Very creepy. And it's this idea that there's absolutely nothing. There's nothing wrong with these people. It's all good. And that's putting our children in a vulnerable position, because we're completely moved away from stranger danger, that these people, there's absolutely no threat from these people at all. And it's been evidenced that they are. And this is regardless of race or even culture. If you are bringing in unvetted men from any area, from any part of the world, well, associated with that is the potential for harm. And you certainly don't encourage children. The videos circulating around the schools are along the same thing. It's this indoctrination that it's only good. There's no harm associated with it at all. That's certainly not something that you want to be teaching a child. And that's what they're teaching the child. It's learn, embed, share. So that's the embed aspect of it. It's the same thing with the libraries. These institutions need to remain completely impartial, but our children are being indoctrinated. It worked really well in universities, so now they're moving into younger and younger children. And don't forget, these are the same ones that wanted to teach sexuality to our young children. So we really need to step up as parents and protect our children against what's happening in the schools. And you need to plug into the schools. You need to speak with your child every day and ask what we discussing at school. You need to check in with your teachers and make sure that your children aren't being taught something that could later be harmful to them.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're very much aware of the growing surveillance state emerging all around us. Whatever you do, you're being watched and your data being harvested. This is why Glenn and Eric Mader formed the Privacy Academy. Join the community designed to help overwhelmed, non-techie people like me learn how to get private online. Head over to privacyacademy.com/Icke and learn how to exit the surveillance state with regular webinars exclusively for you. Now, back to the show. I feel like in every single aspect of what's going on at the moment, even going back into the COVID stuff and all that kind of stuff, that they're just targeting kids in particular. And I also feel like there's a bit of trolling going on, Melissa, as well, to almost wind people up. Because if you've got a situation where there's a lot of men coming in, you don't know who these guys are, they're coming from all over the world, you don't know their background. If they're fleeing, what are they fleeing from? Are they fleeing persecution, or are they fleeing because they've done something and they're getting the hell out of Dodge? Like, we don't know any of this stuff. So then you put them in communities around children, as are in every community. So the local community is vocalizing their concern and worries all over the United Kingdom and indeed all over Europe. So in the face of that, you go, I know, I'm going to get these kids to write Valentine's cards to those guys. Well, there's no way that's not trolling.
One aspect is that we're the people that need to be re-educated. Yet these people are coming from areas that are completely culturally different to us. And where they're being funded to be taught English, there's no funding to teach them our culture, our customs, our values, our laws. There's no direction towards that. And then there's the other layer of the destabilizing minds of children. So they had children terrified that they could kill their granny. That's where it started. So that's the first destabilization. And we now know that statistically it was no more dangerous than a bad flu. But they had children wear masks, scared at school. So that's a destabilization of your mind. Then they progressed that into telling them that you can be a boy or a girl. There's no such thing as a boy or a girl. Men can get pregnant. So that's the fund. If you don't know if you're a boy or girl, then that leaves you particularly malleable for manipulation after that, if you can't even get that basic right. So, and then now they've moved on that if you are patriotic in any way, that's a hate crime and you're racist. And if you have any problem with it doesn't matter what they do, it doesn't matter what crimes they commit, they are inherently good and you cannot question that. If you question that in any capacity, you are racist. So there's a huge destabilization of children's minds and a destabilizing of our nation. Because in my opinion, the barrier to a one world government, a one world currency, is strong patriotic nation. So you cannot have them with patriotism, with allegiance to your flag, to any national emblems. You have to get rid of that first. And we're seeing that. We certainly see it happening. We've seen it happen in America. Now we're really seeing it progress here because time is running out to get this digital ID in. CBDCs are about to be launched now in October in Europe. So they're really going to have to put on the push. CBDC doesn't really work without the data. So you have to have the data before you move into the CBDCs. So they're really going to put on the push for digital IDs. And that's hugely beneficial under this migration. They've already suggested that it would be a good idea. That was long ago. Ron DeSantis came out with that a few years back in terms of immigration. So this is one method that they're pushing, the digital ID. Another is the Safety Act. So now we all have to use the children's settings on the internet unless you can prove who you are. The other aspect of it is the NHS app, which doesn't work in any capacity unless you provide some form of digital ID. So they're really, really pushing this out. It's just that people maybe aren't aware that they're accepting it in some capacity. And it's easy to reject. All you have to do is ask for an alternative for all of it. They have to, under the ICO, if you contact the ICO, they will tell you they have to provide an alternative. You do not have to give your sensitive biometric data for everyday access to society, because the issue that we're going to face, much as they're rushing this through, if you have had your password hijacked, we can reset your password. You can't reset your fingerprint, your eyeball, or your face. So we're in real danger here if we continue to progress this, of the whole thing collapsing.
I think, how far are we now of 2030? The Agenda 2030 plan and stuff, that felt like way over the rainbow, and now it's just a few years away. And I agree with you. I feel like they're trying to progress it massively, because I think they're behind schedule. I think they would have liked to have pushed COVID a little bit further in terms of what they could get through, but I don't think they were fully expecting the pushback that they got in the end. And speaking of pushback, last weekend you mentioned there was a rally, against what's going on in Northern Ireland, which is of course, going on everywhere as well. How did that rally go?
Well, NIPSA, a union for public servants, sent out an email to all of their subscribers to get down to it and counter-protest, because we were apparently racist, even though it was the NGO City of Sanctuary network that we were discussing. They shouted their chants over us. No educated speeches from them, just trying to close us down. They played police sirens over speakers because they didn't want, and called us fascist. Well, patriotism is not fascism, but what is fascism is trying to silence dissent, which is what they were doing, and mobilizing, I suppose, not a military, but an army of unions to stand against us. So in terms of the labels that they point at us, it's always a case of, well, look in the mirror, because that's the ones that you were guilty of. Didn't work in their favor. One of them was approached to, one of the more vocal ones was approached to debate me, come in live, debate me. And he took 2 steps back and went, no. So they're disingenuous then, because if you believed in something, you would definitely want to debate somebody on it. Didn't work out in their favor, because people saw it for what it was. They saw that we were calm, composed. We had an intelligent debate side to put forward. They did not, and just made every effort to silence us. So this is not working anymore. Their labels aren't working anymore. Their attempts to silence aren't working anymore. The silent majority are rising up against it, because I think there's just this innate knowledge now that something serious is on the cards if we don't rise up against it.
Well, yeah, 100%. It feels like a crossroads. Last weekend, I was away at an event in Serbia, and I'm talking to people from Bosnia, from Serbia, from Croatia, and they're saying the same thing, that actually this is happening in their backyard, in terms of also this division, through the media, through governments as well, that to almost try and stoke, well, in the case of the former Yugoslavia, stoke issues that are already there between people. And I guess you could apply that the same in terms of Northern Ireland. I remember the troubles when I was a kid.
Absolutely. That was the purpose of a counter-protest, is to display division. So, and they tried to label us as anti-this, anti-that. Well, there was Catholics and Protestants there. There was gay, straight, there was all different races. It was all people that call Northern Ireland home, that want to protect what we have right now, and we want to fix our own services, our own infrastructure, before we adopt the Cloud Piven strategy of overwhelming it to collapse and then pin it on migrants. I do not have a problem with migration at all. I think that it's necessary in some capacity. Unvetted, unchecked, absolutely not. But that is not the issue. They're trying to pin that issue onto us. But I feel that they're using the migrants as a blame game. They want us divided against them. I think that you have to know your enemy, and your enemy is the government that are bringing in these policies. They're also bringing them in for cheap labour. There was an assembly document from the Northern Ireland Assembly that stated that by 2035 in Northern Ireland, population increase would be from immigration. that birth rates are down, death rates are up, and the solution is to import migrants here. And they also state within that it's for pretty much it's agriculture, hospitality, low-wage jobs. So they're bringing them in because they're more willing to accept a lower standard of living, and that reduces the standard of living for everyone. They're not compassionate about these immigrants at all. They're using them as much as they are using us.
Oh, 100%, 100%. That's the thing that's quite frustrating is that you've got two essentially sets of pawns that are being used, and they're both, going at each other, and you're just thinking to yourself, for goodness sake, just look up, just look up. What's the one action you'd encourage people to take themselves in regards to what's going on in Northern Ireland? Because I know lots of people feel helpless. I talk to people all the time, and they say, yeah, but what can I do? What can I do about it?
For me, it is contact. They get to do their dirty work in the dark. When you shine a light on it, they scurry away like cockroaches. So it's very important. It certainly worked with the health bill. So you contact on a simple basis. Everybody can contact their local councillors, and even for the councils that haven't joined up to this yet, because City of Sanctuary Network, if you look, it's all through the UK. It's all through Ireland. This is going on both islands. So you contact your councillor, you ask them, you contact your schools and ask them, are they associated with the City of Sanctuary? So what criteria are they meeting? Because you can go on and look at what the criteria is and ask, what does that mean for your school, for your library, for your council? Be vocal, let them know that you're absolutely not in favour of this. And don't be afraid of any labels. I think that's the biggest stumbling block, that there's this label of being racist. Patriotism is not a hate crime. Don't let anybody tell you that it is. It's your duty to look after your own communities, your own children. It starts with your children, your own family, your own communities, your own country first. That is your responsibility and your duty. Let nobody call you any names of racist, fascist for performing your responsibility and your duty. And it's your duty, particularly for your children. So contact your schools, ask them, are they involved? Contact your councils and let them know and be vocal. Because when you start shining the light and you are aware and you know that who your enemy is, that you're not directing it to the wrong place, take that anger that people have maybe against the migrants and direct it to where it belongs. It belongs to the policymakers, and that starts with councils. It was certainly identified by George Soros that the top-down authority works to a degree, but then you have to work from the bottom up, and that's why councils, judiciaries, local media are being infiltrated. And this is overtly letting you know, if you look at City of Sanctuary, that NGOs are infiltrating. We have to stop that before that really takes root. The streams of sanctuary, when it moved from city into streams of sanctuary, that really only started about 5 years ago. Didn't everything? So we do have an opportunity to get ahead of this. Every 3 years, your council has to re-sign up to it. So if it starts to infiltrate out, so let's just take Northern Ireland. So it's in to Derry and Belfast. So if we let that get into Newry, Morn and Down, and then that can infiltrate through the other councils. So say 5 councils, we have 11 councils. So if the 5 councils get on board, it puts pressure on the other ones. But if we stop it now, then the other councils don't have to, they're not under pressure to join up. So if you want to keep your democracy, you can't just stand aside, you have to stand up. And sometimes you have to do that. And this is where we are in today's world, that we have to take part before they take over.
Absolutely. And also, if you're not a racist, then someone calling you a racist doesn't make you a racist. They are just words and they are just accusations. It doesn't make it true. And I understand it's not very nice to hear stuff like that, although to be honest, because these terms have been overused so much for the last 10, 15 years even. For instance, if you spoke out against Israel 10, 15 years ago, anti-Semite, and you'd be like, what? No. Whereas now when you hear it, you're like, yeah, whatever. Okay, whatever. It's fine. We're throwing names around. That's fine.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. If somebody was to call me fat, I'd be like, what? So, because it doesn't apply to me. So I feel the same way when somebody calls me a racist, a fascist, or whatever. I have the same thing. What? I'm not. So it doesn't, it's like water off a duck's back. So you have to think, well, does that apply to me? And that's what people do. They're so afraid of the term that they're not asking, does it apply to you? So ask, does it apply to you? Because if you think that it does apply to you, ask yourself, then have an internal dialogue of why that would apply to you. But for most people, certainly not here. It's not an issue at all. Racism isn't an issue at all. Multiculturalism, that doesn't work. So I would have an issue with multiculturalism. I don't have an issue with other cultures, but I'm also very willing to fight and defend my own culture to be preserved. And that's not racism, that's realism.
Yeah, and so you should. How can people find you, Melissa? Because obviously I follow you on X, and you're sharing stuff all the time. Is that the best place to find you?
Yes, I'm an introvert pretending to be an extrovert. I'm ready for it to be over, so I don't really do YouTube because I would have got blocked from that very early on. So it's really just the social media platforms that I'm on.
Fantastic, Melissa. Thank you so much for talking to us, and I'm sure we'll speak again. I'd love to speak again because the world's not getting any less mad. There's always something to talk about, particularly in the British Isles, it seems at the minute.
Well, France is on collapse, and if you just even take the government part out of it, financially they're on the verge of collapse. Germany, the UK is not in a good financial position. The budget has been put back until the end of November. That's pretty much as late as they can go with it. So I would predict a spicy autumn and spring. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Best be prepared. Get the popcorn. Thank you so much, Melissa. Much appreciated.
Thanks for the opportunity.
That's all for the free section of this week's Gareth Icke Tonight. If you'd like to continue watching the episode, I'm joined by investigative journalist and business consultant Matt Stubbs and Phil Buchanan to talk about the state of free speech in the UK and what that means for journalists. And retired state-registered nurse and former government advisor Debi Evans is on to share her fears about organ harvesting and how the passing of the assisted dying bill could be connected to that industry.
The file is very buccaneering. We don't care. We don't operate under those restrictions. And if you want to take us to court, then try and find us, because there are stories that need to be told, and the truth needs to be told, and we will tell them.
The definition of death doesn't exist. There is no statutory definition of death. However, what they say is, and I'll read this and I'll provide you with all of the links to all of the papers. They say that as long as the brain stem retains function, you are not clinically dead.
Please click the link in the description and head over to ickonic.com to continue watching. You can subscribe instantly for just £1.99. Good night.